Andersen. I'm the Director General for IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Well, when we talk about nature, and especially after the Paris Agreement, we have to think about, Paris also spoke a lot about reservoirs and sinks. So let's stop and talk for a moment and think. Sinks and reservoirs, what is that? That's actually nature. It's those forests, it's those mangroves, it's the oceans, it's the terrestrial biodiversity, it's the soil. But how can we make sure that when we talk about climate change, we're also really understanding, yes, energy and renewables is key, but the soils, the plants, the oceans matter greatly. And that's what we're working on. We work on the conservation of nature, of ensuring nature's viability. And the story here is really important. In a way, if we don't do that, then there's really no future for man on this good planet. So having investments in nature and in nature's infrastructure is critical. And that's, now that we're talking about moving into action, that's very much what we're talking about here at the COP, and we've seen some great examples of that while here in Marrakesh. So the big important areas that we have invested in and moved with our members, and I should mention to you that we're a global organization. We are unique in that we have both government and non-governmental members. We have 1,300 members together, and we work on nature-based solutions. And a big effort, for example, that we've been doing in the last few years have been working on forest landscape restoration. We are a very old organization. We were established in 1948, and we have a long engagement with science, with data, with evidence. And since 1948, we have been part of the science of ensuring that we understand the dynamics of nature and of ecosystem-based services. Here, when we're talking climate, for too long a time, we didn't talk about ecosystem-based adaptation. That is something we've now understood, and it is enshrined in the Paris Agreement. We understand with Paris that we need to invest in nature. So what does that look like? Well, healthy oceans will absorb massive amount of carbon, about a quarter of the carbon that we release on an annual basis. So we have to make sure that we have healthy oceans, those seagrasses, those mangroves, those coastal areas, those salt plains matter. And here's the important part. It matters not just for carbon. Forests matter not just for carbon. Forest matters because there are multiple benefits. Let's think about this. If you make sure that you invest in forest landscape restoration, what happens? On the one hand, we store carbon. That's fine. But if we do it well, we will also make sure that there are better jobs and potentials for income for poor people who rely on forests. If you do it really well, you will also make sure that there's a real potential for increased biodiversity. And if you do it well, you will ensure better gender rights. So when we invest in nature, we get these synergies between the many conventions, between biodiversity, climate, desertification, etc., and many of the water-based conventions. So it's very important that we think about ecosystem-based adaptation. For IUCN, working in forest landscape restoration under something we call the Bond Challenge, which was later augmented by the New York Declaration. We have this goal that we will, by 2030, have 350 million hectares restored. These are landscapes that today are degraded, get them back into working landscapes. That's really important. And when we do that, you take that degraded land back into working landscape, what happens? You take off the pressure of the pristine forest, you take off the pressure of the pristine lands, and you are helping to create jobs, to store carbon, to enhance biodiversity, and to enhance ecosystem-based services. So that's what we work in with our many members. And I should maybe mention that we just recently had our Congress in Hawaii. We had more than 10,000 people. And we in the IUCN, we are this big platform, this big tent. And we were really pleased to see every single UN head come. We had obviously Patricia Espinosa, we had Eric Solheim from UNEP, we had John Scanlon from CITES, we had Irina Bokova from UNESCO. So we had all, Naoko Ishii from the GEF, everyone comes to IUCN. Why? Because we are that big tent. And that's a tent that we're bringing here to Marrakesh together with our many members. Well, the big message is obviously to move to action. And we feel that there is a degree of optimism in the air in spite of certain political developments. And we can see that what is possible. From our side, we can see what nature can bring to the table. If you invest in nature's infrastructure, as I mentioned before, that becomes part and parcel of the solution. If, for example, we bring back and we hit the aim of the restoration challenge as well as stop deforestation, just by doing that, you have on an annual basis the same, you absorb the amount of carbon of all the world's cars today that are on the road. That's massive. So think about the solutions that nature brings. Think about soils, what they store in terms of carbon. But healthy carbon-rich soils are also higher productive soils. Higher productive soils are also can give greater plant wealth, and plant diversity can lead to greater biodiversity. So that's the story. The story here is about ecosystem-based adaptation. The story for us is about investing in nature and using nature and nature's bounty to help us restore our planet. And it's all about action. And we don't have time. We have to deliver on the promise. That's what we are here to do.